Hello, and welcome to our second 2025 Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA Beyond Accounting online presentation. I am David Powell of Chartered Accountants Worldwide Network USA, and for today's event we are focusing on leadership. Our first session is a series of 4 presentations that run for about 60 minutes. The first one will be about 20 minutes, followed by a 2-part second presentation of about 30 minutes and a final one of about 10 minutes. We will then transition to a second session where our presenters will discuss the topics presented as well as any audience Q&A. Total time, including this introduction, of 90 minutes. In joining this event, you will have been prompted to sign into Slido, which is an app we are using to do Q&A and polls. We will also use details of those who sign in to send out digital badges you can add to your LinkedIn profile if you so choose. You can also reference the badge in attending this event as part of your own CPD activity. You will also see a control panel located at the top right of your screen if you're on a laptop, or at the bottom of the screen if on a mobile device. The panel has tabs for Q&A and polls. And you can enter questions under the Q&A tab. And if you see someone ask a question you like, if you like their question, it raises it up the list we're looking at. And in session 2, we will be monitoring this list in deciding which questions to ask our presenters. We also have copies of the slides being presented today available for download underneath the screen that is playing this webinar. During the event, we will be asking 5 polling questions and we'll give you about 20 seconds to answer. If you have any issue with answering the polls, log a comment under Q&A so we can timestamp your participation. For those of you that are US CPAs and have requested CPE credits, answering the polling questions is a requirement to evidence you have attended the event. At the end of the event, you will also receive a short survey, and please complete it because we appreciate your feedback and let us know how we do. The learning objectives for today's presentation are that you learn how to manage and successfully navigate new leadership dynamics. Can you move? Thank you, Shane. Setting yourself up for success, not failure, establishing a healthy team leader dynamic, and understanding and leveraging core leadership competencies. Secondly, creating high-performance teams with cross-functional collaboration and partnerships, as well as global multinational cultural content. And finally, mastering assurance leadership concepts to position yourself as a catalyst for positive organizational change. Now, before I introduce our first speaker, let me launch our first poll. Polling question 1 is, culture informs purpose, builds pride and brand. Do you agree, disagree, or don't you know? And so to our first speaker, Brian Jones, based in Pennsylvania. Brian is a retired reinsurance executive with more than 25 years of global leadership experience, including 8 years spent living and working in Zurich, Switzerland. He has held senior leadership roles at GE Insurance Solutions and Swiss Re in the area of operations, claims, strategy, and casualty underwriting. Upon his retirement, Brian started his own coaching and consulting business, Coaching for Executives LLC. Today, he works with individuals at varying points of their leadership journeys, from would-be leaders to seasoned CEOs. He also consults with businesses on topics ranging from process improvement and simplification to organizing vitality, executive team development, as well as strategic growth. Brian is the author of an ebook download titled Your First 100 Days. And now, let's close the poll and share the results. Okay, 100% agree. Thank you very much. And now, Brian, it's over to you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak to everyone around the world. So listen, what I'm going to spend my time speaking about today are these areas of focus for leaders at all levels. It's interesting to me in my coaching practice, whether I'm dealing with people, leaders at a C-suite level, or young leaders who are taking over their first team, a key red thread that everyone experiences, irrespective of their experience, is, my gosh, I'm in charge of this stuff, whatever this stuff is, and there's just too much of it coming at me. I'm overwhelmed by information. I don't know how to set priorities. And actually, because of this, I'm somewhat afraid I'm failing. one of the things that I encourage all leaders to do as they take over a new team or as they're leading their current team is to take some steps to hopefully slow the world down, to hopefully segment the world that they're living in into bite-sized chunks so that they can begin to diagnose where are things going well and where are things not going well. And with this understanding, begin to take actions that help them and their teams prosper. In the end, the takeaway on this slide is really kind of what I'm all about. When I'm coaching people, it's sort of a joke, but it's not really a joke. I ask them, what are the 5 things that will get you fired if not done? Because those are the places to think about spending time to set as priorities. You'll see on this slide some buckets of, I say, rational subgroups of activity or thought that I encourage people to consider, and to consider aligning their activities and their time into these buckets in a very specific way. Now, just reading across the slide, these buckets are team and people, which is probably the most important topic, and I'll spend more time on this later. Customers, and these are both internal and external customers. Understanding the market in which you are operating and your organization is operating. Having some facility with the systems and processes that you're responsible for, because these systems and processes probably have a great deal to do with, first of all, how satisfied your employees are, but probably more importantly here, even how satisfied your customers are with you, your team, and also your organization. Legal and compliance is also a very important area that leaders need to focus on for obvious reasons. And then the capstone, I would say, bucket of activity is really around culture. So let's go through these real quick. Team and people. A fundamental question that as you take over a team or even as you run your team on a year-to-year basis is the question, do you have the right people doing the right things in the correct way? Pretty simple statement, but how do you know the answers to those questions? Well, first of all, hopefully you're talking to people in the organization who are giving you an impression of how they perceive your team and the individuals on your team. But hopefully you're also doing your own diagnosis in terms of right people, right things in the right way. When it comes to people, what I encourage new leaders and old leaders to think about is a very clinical, sort of critical view of the people who work for them. And understanding we all have bias and we all have the possibility of favoring people, trying to take a step back, maybe getting some input from other people in the organization about the individuals on your team, and diagnose, what do my people do? So if I'm evaluating them, 2 dimensions, what they do and how they do it. The what people do is really kind of the daily work. So maybe they're responsible for managing a certain number of accounts. Maybe they're responsible for growing sales year over year. Maybe they're responsible for processing a certain number of tasks in a period of time. That's very much the what of that I'm speaking about here. These tend to be activities that are oftentimes found in people's management business objectives and things that it's pretty objective. Okay, you did it, you didn't do it, you did it well, you didn't do it well. That's really the what. The other dimension that I encourage leaders to consider is how the people on their teams perform their work. So are they a good colleague? Are they adhering to the corporate values? Are they adhering to the culture that you're trying to build in your organization? That's the how. The magic of this is when you can plot your team members on a matrix. It's a 9-blocker. You've probably seen such things where you rate them in terms of the dimensions of what they do and how they do it. And you start asking yourself the question, gosh, who are my top performers? And for my top performers, why do I think they're top? And do other people agree? If I were to calibrate with other leaders who see my team in action, would they largely agree or would they disagree with how I've placed people? Now, once you come into a place where you feel pretty good about where you have people placed, asking yourself the question, for my top performers, what am I doing to keep them engaged? What am I doing to re-recruit them? What am I doing to make sure they feel like there is not only a place today for them, but there's growth opportunity tomorrow? So when we think about team and people, this is such an important role for a leader to have, to take this in their hands and make sure your top performers, your stars, feel like they're stars and feel like there's a future for them. Likewise, on that same matrix, there will be a bottom left-hand quadrant. These are people who are struggling with what they do and how they do it. They're not getting a good rating from you. They're probably not people getting a super good bonus. They're probably people that you need to have a strong look at and ask yourself the question, gosh, what would it take to get this person to move up, to be a better performer? What's in their way? And can I help them get there? Now, this also begs the question, if they've been in that lower left-hand quadrant for year over year for a period of time, there's also a place to ask yourself the question, is it time for us to move on? Is it time for them to find some place where they are better suited? And for me to find some place as a leader to put somebody into that role who can better perform. And this is also raising the topic of delegation and accountability. One of the things I observe as a place where leaders oftentimes struggle, again, when they're so busy, they're trying to take in so much information, so many new things happening around them, they fail to delegate. They take on too much themselves. They don't delegate tasks that could be done by others to others, and they will resist holding people accountable for work being performed. One of the things that really helps a leader set priorities and also focus on the work that they should be doing as a leader, as an executive, is making sure you're clearing your plate as much as you can from that which can be done by others, but you can't do that if the team underneath you is not competent and fit for purpose. So let me move on for team and people in a moment. And then after I get through this slide, I'm going to take you through, especially for team and people and also culture, failure modes. So places where leaders really get it wrong and trip over their own feet. If I move on to customers, here I'm focused on internal and external customers as well. As a leader, it's important to understand what is critical for quality for my customers. What do they care about? And am I delivering that? How am I doing in terms of ease of doing business? Do they like working with my team? Do they like working with my organization? Or am I a pain? Because if I'm a pain, I'm getting to the place where maybe customers are saying to themselves, gosh, I don't want to do business with those knuckleheads anymore. I'm going to take my stuff elsewhere. So very important that leaders understand how the customer perceives you and how you understand what's important to them. Moving on, a related topic is that of market. So oftentimes it's interesting to me, I encounter leaders who lead maybe a back office function or lead something that is not customer touching, customer facing, and they really don't understand the context in which their business is operating, which I think is a big miss. Part of your role as a leader is always interpreting the outside world for your team. So if there are changes in the market, if there are changes in competitor behavior, if there are changes in buyer behavior or customer behavior, being able to understand what those changes are and helping your team understand, hey, look, here's where we fit in. Here's where we need to do some things differently in order to delight our customers, in order to seize new opportunities. That's very much inside the remit of every leader. And even if you're not customer touching, customer facing, you still ought to understand these things. Systems and processes. Where do systems and processes create risk? Where do they delight or irritate customers? Spoke earlier about things that drive customers crazy. Oftentimes, it's the interface. It's the process interface between yourself and them where something is broken, something is not as clean as it could be, there are handoffs that have dropped. There are opportunities likely as you take on a new role to think about simplifying, automating, and error-proofing processes so that you get out of your own way and increase the customer satisfaction and hopefully your ability to retain those customers as you move through time. Legal and compliance, I presume everybody on this call is very spun up on the importance of having a culture that pays attention to legal and compliance. It's very important that you set as a leader and the leaders around you set the tone from the top, as it's often called, so that you are clear with the people who work for you. Hey, around here, we care about the law, we care about compliance, and we don't want to find ourselves on the front page of any newspapers because we have anti-money laundering problems or fraud problems or whatever problems. Setting that tone is super important, and a component of that is also ensuring that you have controls that are sufficient and appropriate for the risk that you're trying to manage, and that you as a leader own those controls, and you are helping the staff understand it's important to you, therefore it should be important to them. The last one on this slide is back to culture. And what I want to talk about here with you is the notion of aspirational culture versus lived culture. Aspirational culture is pretty simple, and you guys have all seen it, I'm sure, in your careers. Aspirational culture lives on PowerPoint slides. These are the statements that an organization makes about, we believe in this, we're for that, we're against that. So, we believe our employees are our number one asset. We believe that we should put the customer first. We believe. Aspirational culture is very important, but what's actually important to understand is what is the distance between what's on those slides and what senior leaders are telling the teams versus how is that culture lived in an organization. So, for example, if you say people are our most important asset around here, well, if your organization or you as a leader don't provide clarity in terms of training opportunities, development opportunities, growth opportunities for your team, people will start to wonder in the back of their minds, are these guys really walking the talk, or are they just telling me a story? It's important. It's really important that you not just tell a story, that you walk the talk. You all agreed, I think, with David's first question about how culture informs purpose and builds pride and brand. It also, by the way, is super important to employee engagement and to employee retention. Two things that pretty much every firm I work with and every firm I'm aware of has some challenges with. So Shane, if we could move on to the next slide, that'd be great. So folks, here, what I'm doing is I'm going through the same basic outline, but I'm going to focus on places where it goes wrong. And I'm going to focus most of my comments on team and people and on culture. You're going to find these to be related topics. And for me, these are the most important on the list in terms of places where when leaders fail here, they actually fail in a pretty big and spectacular way. One of the biggest things that leaders struggle with, again, irrespective of whether they're C-suite or junior leaders, is actually driving accountability for outcomes in their organization. I encounter very senior people every week in my practice who struggle to give clear feedback, who struggle to tell somebody, you know what, that was not your best effort. I know you could do better, and I would like something different from you next time. What they're doing is falling into the trap of being nice to somebody, or they perceive they're being nice, but they're not being clear. Nice is, I'm going to basically kick the can down the road. You're not performing, but I'm not going to tell you because, first of all, it makes me uncomfortable to tell you you're not doing well. And I know it's going to make you uncomfortable, so I'd rather we just push that under the carpet together. That's really an indication of a leader abdicating their responsibility to their team and the broader organization. And what you also do is you really sell out the person that you're speaking to there. They deserve from you as their leader the clear feedback that, you know what, this is not great. You know what, I know you can do better. Because they are not going to change their performance unless you as the leader tell them there's a need to change. And many are the people I coach who have been in their career for a long time. Everything they think is going swimmingly, only to find out when they get a new leader who is actually clear and is not so concerned about kind, they're just being clear and objective, suddenly they don't fit anymore. So this person 5, 10, 20 years into their career suddenly finds there's no longer a place for them. That's really a crappy thing to do, and that's the outcome of leaders over time not doing their job. So it's incorrect, in my view, to not be clear with people. It's incorrect as a leader, an abdication of responsibility to not try to get the best out of your team. It's also incorrect if you try to play favorites. Now, we all have biases. We will all probably tend to favor some people over others. But being aware of those biases, having other people, other peers check you on how you're thinking about the team performance and who your key players are, that's the way to mitigate bias and gets you through the problem, the potential problem of poor processes. So, you need to have calibrations. You should do those 9 blockers I spoke about. You should rack and stack your employees. And as a leader, you should take a step back with some frequency and clear and cold look at your team, look at performance, and give the feedback necessary to get that team to its next level of performance. And finally, on this one, reward and performance need to be tied together. So there are only so many goodies to go around in terms of training opportunities, in terms of money, in terms of advancement. You should be really focused on ensuring the people who are your star players are getting those things. Now, I'm going to zip through over to culture, and happy to take questions later on these customer market systems and legal. But culture, look, if there's too big a gap between the aspirational culture and the live culture, you're going to breed cynicism and you're going to damage your brand. And again, back to employee retention, you're going to hurt yourself. So paint the picture of where you want the culture to be and actively work to make sure you're closing the gap between how people perceive the firm, how people perceive the culture, and what you're saying the culture is. The only way to do this is to ask people, to set an environment where people who are doing the work every day can give you that feedback on, hey, here's how I think about working here. Here's how I think about our culture. Here's Mr. or Mrs. Leader, where I think you could do a better job driving culture. That's the only way to get underneath how the culture is really landing. So with that, David, I think I still got a couple of minutes, but I think I'm going to wrap it up. And thank everybody for their time and their attention. And I look forward to the other presentations and the questions.
Thank you, Brian. And yes, you had a couple more minutes, but we can make that up on the Q&A later. Thank you for that.